Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Yogeshwarana Gatima Bahistrilokya Vidya Tapoyoga Samadhi
Hare Krishna. Yes, Mataji has today's class is Her Grace Panchali Kar Mataji is going to take, but she requested me that she'll come little bit late, 5 minutes too late. So we can continue with the word to word, and then try the translation and the purport by the time she comes. I'll do the word to word. Yoga Ishwaranam, of the great saints and devotees. Gatim, destination. Ahu, it is said. Anta, within. Bahi, without. Trilokya, of the three planetary systems. Pavana Anta, within the air. Atmanam, of the subtle body. Na, never. Karmabi, by fruitive activities. Tam, that. Gatim, speed. Apnuvanti, achieve. Vidya, devotional service. Tapa, austerities. Yoga, mystic power. Samadhi, knowledge. Bhajam, bhajam, of those who entertain. Hare Krishna. Does anyone wants to read the translation and the purport?
Yes, Prabhuji, can I read, please?
Yes, yes.
Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Thank you, Prabhuji. So, translation: the transcendentalists are concerned with the spiritual body as such by the strength of the devotional service, austerities, mystic power, and transcendental knowledge. Their movements are unrestricted within and beyond the material world. The fruitive workers or the gross materialists can never move in such an unrestricted manner. Purport: the materialistic scientists endeavor to reach other planets by mechanical vehicles is only a futile attempt. One can, however, reach heavenly planets by virtuous activities, but one can never expect to go beyond Swarga or Jana Loka by such mechanical or materialistic activities, either gross or subtle. The transcendentalists who have nothing to do with the gross material body can move anywhere within or beyond the material world. Within the material world, they move in the planetary systems of the Mahar, Janas, Tapa, and Satyaloka. And beyond the material worlds, they can move into the Vaikunthas as unrestricted spacemen. Narad Muni is one of the examples of such spacemen, and Durvasa Muni is one of such mystics. By the strength of devotional service, austerities, mystic powers, and transcendental knowledge, everyone can move like Narad Muni or Durvasa Muni. It is said that Durvasa Muni traveled throughout the entirety of material space and part of spiritual space within 1 year only. The speed of the transcendentalist can never be attained by the gross or subtle materialist. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna, Mataji. Please accept our umbrella obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna, Prabhujis and Matajis, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to serve Srimad Bhagavatam and serve all of you. And thank you very much. Apologies for being slightly late. Thank you very much. So we are for reading the purport, for reading the verse and the translation and the purport. So we are doing Srimad Bhagavatam 2.2.23. Prabhuji, has the Mangalacharan been done?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
All the things are done, Mataji. So you can go ahead. Yeah. Thank you, Mataji.
So thank you very much. So Om Jnana Timirandhya Jnana Jnana Shalakaya Chakshuri Militam Yena Tashmi Sri Gurve Namaha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deva Gauravani Pacharine Vishesha Srinivadi Pashyata Deshitarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gauri Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Thank you again for giving me this opportunity. So I start discussing this with all of you based on the mercy of my Guruji and all the Gurujis from whom I've learned. Please accept my apologies if I do make any mistakes, and do correct me if I go wrong anywhere. It has been slightly rushed way of doing things, so please do accept my apologies if I do go wrong anywhere. So we in chapter 2, so let's start with a couple of minutes of recap before we go into this verse. So chapter 2, as we know, is about knowing the Lord in the heart. Chapter 1 talks about the Virat Roop of the Lord, where Sukdev Goswami is encouraging all to associate or relate to the Lord in his Virat Roop, and so that we get to know the Lord from the impersonal, coming and realizing him as the personal, slowly, step by step. Chapter 2 describes the realization of the Lord in the heart, and Sukdev Goswami takes us through the verses firstly by talking about Lord Brahma and how Lord Brahma meditates on the Virat Roop of the Lord and regained his lost consciousness by praying to the Lord, pleasing the Lord, and he was able to regain the consciousness and rebuild the creation. And this was followed by a few verses on Sukdev Goswami's teachings on how to be able to relate to the Lord, we have to be a minimalist in this world and not engage in too much of materialistic enjoyments and live simple lives. We further go on in the verses where Sukdev Goswami teaches us about relating to the Lord through his physical attributes, how the Lord looks and how we should worship him from his feet up to his face, and how we can visualize him. And then lastly, in the last few verses, we have been seeing how Sukdev Goswami talks about how expert yogis can reach the higher planets, or can control the life air and quit their bodies in order to transcend this material world. And verse 22, so we are doing verse 23 today. Verse 22 talks about the yogis wanting to reach the topmost planet, the Brahmaloka, and being able to do so by their yogic power, and by yogic power, we mean where the yogis are able to control and are able to perform the eightfold achievements of the mystic perfection. So wherein they can become, small or big, or very light or very heavy, create something material, annihilate something material, or, control certain material elements, etc. So these eightfold achievements of mystic power are perfected by the yogis who are able to do so, and by doing so they're able to leave the earthly planets and go up to the higher planets, up to Brahmaloka. However, we are advised and we are taught by Sukhdev Goswami, but despite the fact that they perfect themselves in these yogic powers, despite the fact that they reach the topmost planet, they are still bound by the material energy. They're still very much under the control of the threefold miseries of life and the three modes of material nature and under Maya. So these material, these mystic powers do not help them to come out of the material world completely. So this is where we have come across all this in the last few verses in chapter 2. Now, verse 23 starts with the transcendentalist. There are quite a few things discussed in this chapter. It starts about the transcendentalists who are concerned with the spiritual body. So we get to know about who the transcendentalists are. We've been learning about and reading about transcendentalists. We have come across this word, the transcendentalists, many and many and many a times. Now, in this verse, we are further being talked about and explained a bit more about who the transcendentalists really are and why they are concerned with only the spiritual body. Now, we are also talked about devotional service a bit, mystical powers of the transcendentalists, or versus the devotional service that is also mentioned in this verse. And lastly, we are talked about movements by the transcendentalists. And the verse specifically talks about the two types of movements, the restricted movements and the unrestricted movement. And what really is the ideal movement? So the verse concludes with what really is the ideal movement of the transcendentalists. So these are a few things that we will be looking into whilst discussing this verse. So if we start with the first thing, who are the transcendentalists? So as we have understood from our study of the Bhagavatam so far and Bhagavad Gita so far, the transcendentalists, by simple definition, are the yogis or are the souls or the people who want to transcend this material world, who wants to leave this material world. So these are people who have understood that this material world is nothing but a prison, and it is full of misery, and there is if we are bound by these material energies, there is repeated birth and death and old age and disease, and there is no coming out of it. So these are transcendentalists who realize that this is not our original home, and they have identified that, realized that, and so they want to transcend this world. They want to go outside this material world. One can be a yogi and be a transcendentalist. One can be a jnani and be a transcendentalist. One can be a devotee and be a transcendentalist. So there are many ways of being a transcendentalist. So we've also, in the Bhagavad Gita, we've also learned about people who take the pravritti marg and the nivritti marg. The pravritti marg is, people who just want to, they hanker after more and more and better material enjoyment. So through their accrued good karmas, or by meditating on demigods, they sometimes accrue or acquire the power or the ability to transcend just the earthly materialistic surroundings and move up the planetary system to the higher planets, but they are still bound by the material energy. Now we also have the yogis, and we will look into the yogis a bit more later on. But we've also learned about the yogis in the verse, in the previous verse, how they are able to leave this material body and the bondage of this material body by balancing by controlling the life air. Now, as we understand, our soul is balanced by these life airs inside our bodies. So by controlling the life air in our body through their spiritual mystic processes, through the yoga, the yogis are able to make the soul go up and up and up and up, and then make the soul go out of this gross body through the cerebrum or the top of their head. And they're able to do that by controlling the life air inside our body, which balances our soul inside us. So the yogis can also become transcendentalists, and we've been given a few examples later in the purport, but we'll talk about that a bit later on. We can also have Gyanis who acquire knowledge, and they realize that this is not our real home, and they also want to really leave this material world and material bondage. But on the other hand, we also have the people who take the nivritti mark, or the people who are take the path of bhakti, and they realize that the only way to transcend, and the only real way to transcend, is to surrender to the Lord, who is with whom is our real home, in whose land is our real home. So they take the path of devotion, and that is the way they want to leave this material world. So the transcendentalist, by definition, is anyone who wants to transcend this material world. How they do that, the path they take to do that, is entirely dependent on the individual souls. So this is what we understand by, the first part of our verse, that the transcendentalists are concerned only with the spiritual body. Why? Because no matter whether you're a yogi, whether you're a jnani, or whether you're a bhakta or a devotee, you understand that this material body is a bondage, and we are restricted in this material body. So the only way out of the miseries of this material world is to leave this gross and subtle body and acquire that spiritual body, which is our original body, which is which would take us to the spiritual land where we have our real home. That is our original constitutional position. So that is the first part of our verse. Now, the next thing that the verse concentrates upon is a bit about what do the transcendentalists want? Now, when we define the transcendentalists, we've just said that the transcendentalists really want to move. They want to leave this body. They want to leave this material world and the material body. Now, what about how do they want to do that? And that is where Prabhupada starts a bit in his purport about material science versus spiritual science. So we see nowadays how, scientists, they are endeavoring to go to various planets, and, let's just start with, aeroplane going from one place of the world to the other. And then we come to rockets. And people being sent to different planets, the moon, we've come to know that people have apparently reached the moon, and people are apparently trying to reach the Mars as well. And we question that, yes, scientists and astronomers, they do all their calculations and they've been trying to visit all the other planets with this material body. Now, our material body is made for planet Earth, with the Panchaputas, with air, water, earth, ether, and fire. They make up our body, and the world we live in is made up of these elements. The surroundings, these elements are water. If our planet is mainly water, as is our body mainly of water. We have fire, yes, we have the fire inside our body as well. We have all that we see in surrounding us. That is what makes up our body as well. And that is because we are fit to live only in this world. Now, should we decide to go to other planets, we have to think about it. So Prabhupada questions that, yes, these scientists, when they plan go to other planets, they need to realize that with this body, we really cannot go to other planets. Even if you want to go from one country to another, we need a passport for that country. We need conditions to be able to meet the rules and regulations of that particular country to be able to enter that country. So if we have the intelligence to understand that to move from one country to another, there are certain regulations we need to follow to be able to just get entry into that world. Why cannot we have the intelligence to understand that to move from one planet to another, we cannot just go in this body? And we see the examples of, even when we people go to outer space, they have to cover their body. They have to cover their body with various things to be able to, land on a different planet. Now, the Gita says that there are no places that is devoid of souls. Souls are everywhere. They can be in gross bodies, subtle bodies, spiritual bodies, but souls are everywhere. So when people do go to other planets, so say, for example, when they landed on a different planet, they said we landed on the moon, and they couldn't see anybody over there. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there wasn't any soul around. That doesn't, just by the fact that, our senses, our eyes, our ears, our touch, our nose, or we are not able to see or hear or touch things that we can perceive with our body. That does not necessarily mean that we can see everything, that souls do not exist. There will be souls, there are souls in every single planet, only we are not able to see them. We are not able to hear them because our body is not meant to be in that planet. And this is the understanding that materialists or materialistic scientists fail to understand in their limited knowledge, because their knowledge is based on material understanding and material. There is a limit to that. Anything material has a limit. Whereas as soon as you transcend the material, you reach the unlimited world of the spiritual. So when our understanding is limited by our material senses, it is only natural that we are not able to see, despite the fact that we are surrounded by souls. Even as we speak over here, there might be subtle bodies roaming around us, ghosts have subtle bodies as well. We are just not able to see them, but that does not mean that they do not exist. So this is something that Prabhupada is drawing your attention to, the very first thing in his purport, by talking about the materialistic scientists' endeavor to reach the other planets with the use of mechanical vehicles. And he says that it is a futile attempt, because you can reach other planets, but that is not a natural state. You're neither able to reach the planet properly, you're not able to reach the planet properly with your own bodies. You have to, you have to surround yourself with other things, wear other things. And even then, you're not protected or guaranteed protection. And even by landing there, you're not able to perceive the true nature of that planet, because you're not even able to see the souls in the planet, and the souls make they are the life of any planet. So that is the first thing we are drawn attention to in the purport. However, the yogis, they understand, they want to free themselves from these restricted bodies. So they want to do that because they understand that the soul is much more powerful than the gross body and the subtle bodies. So they want to go away from this material form, and they practice the yoga. So even in Bhagavad Gita 8.10, Krishna tells Arjuna how the yogis are able to again control their life air and able to make their soul exit their body through the top of their head. And Sukdev Goswami mentions the same thing over here. So one has to set oneself free from the limitations of this world, and only then can one become a true transcendentalist. And how do we do that? So we have to deny the rules of this material world. We are restricted by our senses, the five senses, and we are restricted by wanting to please our senses, by wanting to be controlled by our sense gratification. So that is what controls us. Now we do see people who are tired of this sense gratification, and they really want to give that up. So we see, people just wanting to leave everything, leaving their home and family life, and then just wanting to go to the Himalayas or any mountains or in the quiet, and then just to practice devotion by themselves. But there is no guarantee that just by leaving or just by denying sense gratification of the gross body, they are able to become true transcendentalists. So their movement, the movement that is talked about in this verse, is of various types. It's not just movement as in moving from one planet to another, or movement from one place to another. It's also movement of the soul. So if the soul wants to transcend, the soul has to encourage itself to move from being controlled by the material energy and become free from it. And in wanting to do that, if a person thinks that, okay, if by just giving up my sense gratification, I'm able to do so, then where is the guarantee that the pride or the false ego or the intelligence of that person will not pull him down to be being restricted by material nature again. So we see so many examples of where, you know, people can even become proud of their devotion. So they think they have become great devotees. We see people being jealous of other devotees, or you know, competing against each other, even in the even you know whilst doing service. So we see people doing lots of charity on one hand and being, you know, really, really mean on the other hand. There can be a divergence in what people are doing, in what people are wanting to do, and what they are actually doing in practice. So just by leaving the material senses, or you know, the senses around eye, or sense gratification around eyes, nose, tongue, skin, and ear, just by leaving that and moving away from that does not necessarily mean that you are moving towards becoming a transcendentalist, because the movement towards becoming a transcendentalist is only and only true if one is able to leave behind the subtle senses as well, the mind, the intelligence, and the false ego. And we know how over and over and over and over again we've been told by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita how the mind controls us. You know, he says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, he says quite a few verses. He says in 6.6, he says that for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his very mind will be the greatest enemy. In 6.7, he says, for one who has conquered the mind, the super soul is already reached, but for he has attained the tranquility. And then he talks so many times, you know, a couple of times in the Bhagavad Gita, and so many times in so many shastras across, how to worship him and engage the mind in devotion. And he says, you know, in Bhagavad Gita, as we know, he says in the 9th chapter and in the 11th chapter of Manmana Bhava Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskuru Mam Evasyasi Yuktaivam Atvanam Mad Parayanaha. So, you engage your mind unto me and become my devotee, Krishna says. Offer your obeisances to me and obey me. Just give me your mind. So we know how the mind can be a big obstruction in becoming a true transcendentalist and for moving away from the material world. This step-by-step movement from going to the from the material towards the Lord, not just realizing the Lord in the heart, but in wanting to reach the Lord, in wanting to reach, in wanting to become a spiritual and part of the spiritual body of the Sat-Chit Ananda of the Lord. That is the process that Sukadeva Goswami is constantly talking about. And we see that this movement, by talking about the ones who fall because they are great devotees, but they have fallen because they have been unable to control either their material bodies or their subtle bodies. And we see, you know, how many times people have fallen through temptations, wanting sense gratification, whether it's Vishwamitra Muni, who fell after seeing Menaka. We see Ajamil, you know, who engaged, he gave up devotion and went with a prostitute. We see Saubhari Muni, who fell prey, who, you know, he saw fish mating, and he gave up his meditation, and he just wanted to get married to, and he got married to the daughters of Mandata, as we know. So as devotees, what we are being told in the verse is that we are not following jnana, we are not thinking that we have to go step by step according to what the rules are. We are not doing the yoga process, but the best way to become a transcendentalist is through pure bhakti. Now, on earth, there are two options. You can be free from the bodily conditions, or you cannot be free. You're bound by somewhere. But in the higher planets, as I mentioned in the purport, in the higher planets, one is not restricted, especially in the top higher planets, the first four, the Satyaloka, which is which is Brahmaloka, Tapasloka, Janasloka, and Mahaloka. People are not, the souls are not restricted as much as they are restricted in the middle planets or in the earthly planets, to go to, from one place to another, or to be perfect in mystic powers. These are something that is automatically with them, and they gain that, and they have that by default. So, traveling from one planet to another is not a huge thing for the souls who already live in the higher planets, in the topmost planets. Now, yogic transcendentalists who still are attached a bit to the material, they can transcend up to the Svargaloka, as Prabhupada says, but they cannot go beyond that. They cannot go to Mahajanas, Tapas, and Satyaloka. It is only, the ones who are completely have given up their, any attachment to their gross bodies, they are able to transcend to the higher lokas. And then, the four topmost lokas, as we know, they are not annihilated even after the first, even after the partial dissolution of creation. But up to when we reach the Svargaloka, up to Svargaloka, as we know, during the partial annihilation of creation, that is dissolved. So the ones who want to transcend and yet are pulled back a bit by the material energy, they are only able to go up to the Svargaloka, but they are not able to go up to the top four lokas, which remain and are not annihilated during the partial annihilation. Of course, even the top four lokas are dissolved during the total dissolution after a full day of Brahma, but but after one kalpa, after the day of Brahma, when only there is partial dissolution, the top four lokas remain as they are. And as we know, the top four lokas are the lands of Lord Brahma, the four Kumaras, and the great sages. So traveling to various planets in this material world by such transcendentalists, by very, very elevated souls who have reached the top planet and, are wanting to even reach higher, wanting to go up to the spiritual world, that is not exactly a very exciting thing for transcendentalists, or the ones who want to become a transcendentalist, or the ones who have realized the truth about our position and what we are doing in this world. So for them, their movement is primarily, and their primary want is to move completely out of this material world. And by leaving not just the material body, not just this material world, but reaching directly to the Lord, to the Vaikunthas. And this, Prabhupada says, is the actual science. It's the science of Krishna consciousness, not the materialistic science, not the materialistic scientists' endeavor to reach the other planets through a rocket, but the transcendentalist, spiritual, Krishna conscious science, which tells us what the true nature of our living is, what we are, who we are, why we are here, and where we really have to go, where our real movement is. So the real movement that the transcendentalists realize is what is highlighted in this verse, that the transcendentalists want to just move beyond this material world and just go from the limitations and restrictions of this prison beyond to the limitless, unrestricted spiritual world, up to the Vaikunthas, up to Krishna Loka, up to, where they desire to go. And that is the step-by-step way of, telling us how, through the teachings of how to reach the Lord, whether you do it in one lifetime, whether one does that in various lifetimes or millions of lifetimes, as long as one realizes that the true movement is not just taking a rocket and moving from one planet to another with our materialistic body, but the true movement is actually going beyond beyond this materialistic world, understanding the real science of what is material and what is spiritual and what our real movement should be. So understanding the limitations that is going on in this body, which is controlling the soul within the body by making the soul do what the false ego wants the soul to do, or what the intelligence or the mind wants the soul to do. Now that is not the true nature of our soul. By being controlled by our gross or subtle body, the soul is acting what it is being told by these material energies. But it is denying the soul to do what the soul actually wants to do. And what does the soul actually want to do? As we know that we are parts and parcels of the Lord, we are as Satchit Ananda as the Lord. So our real enjoyment, or the soul's real enjoyment, lies in serving the Lord. And as we know from Chaitanya Charitamrita, Jiver Swarupai Krishna Nityadas. So our only way of real happiness is to connect with the Lord by surrendering to the Lord. And by surrendering to the Lord, the soul finds its real happiness. So it's not that, when we surrender in this material world, we think that, we have to be under the control of some other person. But when we actually realize that we surrender to the Lord, that is where the soul gains real happiness. And the transcendentalists understand that. So when they want to renunciate, they want to renunciate completely everything, so that they can go beyond this material and they can free their soul from being in the bondage of the mind, the intelligence, or the gross body, the sense gratification, and go beyond all of that. Now, the other thing to remember is that we as souls, we are eternally controlled. We are always controlled. If we are in this material world, we are controlled by the material energy. But when we are in the spiritual world, we are still controlled. We are controlled by the Lord. But there is the difference. When the Lord controls us, his control is the control of love. And that control has no restriction. as the material body. So if we say if it's our finger and we are moving our finger, even that finger is controlled by our body and then ultimately our mind, which is directing the finger to move. But when the Lord controls us with love, he does not restrict us. And hence we see, you know, the ones who are true to in their devotion to the Lord, they remain in the spiritual world. The ones who are not, the ones who want to lord themselves, they fall into the material world. So there, although the soul is eternally under control, there is a huge difference in the spiritual control by the Lord and the material control by the material body and by the material energy. As we know that the Lord has there's two kinds of energies, the spiritual energy, which is supportive to the soul, and the material energy, which gives punishment to the soul in the material world, but punishment not to punish us, because the Lord is that the relationship with the Lord is that of love, and Krishna, no matter who we are, even if someone does not believe in Krishna, Krishna would still shower love on that person. So someone who's our father, who's our real father, can never ever not love us. So when we are sent into this material world and given the so-called punishment, that punishment is not punishment for punishment's sake, but that is, as we know, that is to reform us. So we would rather, the soul is the happiest when we are controlled by this spiritual energy. And that is what the transcendentalists understand. And that is the reason they want to move away from the control of Maya and move to being in the control of the Lord in the spiritual world. And in this verse, in the purport, Prabhupada talks about two such devotees or personalities who have transcended, who are transcendentalists. And the slight difference in them, you know, and how they move in the various, in the material and spiritual world. So the purport talks about Narad Muni and Durvasa Muni. Now Narad Muni is under the control of the Lord, and he travels all around the material and the spiritual world, but he travels in complete bliss. He travels with the Lord's name on his mouth at all times. He's the greatest devotee. He goes around talking and making others devotees, you know, helping others to become devotees. And there is absolutely no restrictions in his travel. And where he travels, there is nowhere in the Shastras do we see that Narad Muni is traveling from one place to another in fear, in anger, in sadness, or in any other emotion other than happiness, other than happily chanting the name of the Lord. So although Narad Muni is under the control of the spiritual energy, his travel, his movement is unrestricted, and his movement is full of bliss. We see the case of Durvasa Muni, the other personality who has been mentioned in the purport, and we see that Durvasa Muni, who was also a great mystic, a great yogi, but there's a slight difference in his devotion, because his devotion was sometimes tinged with arrogance and with pride, which pulled him down towards the material energy at times, and which denied him the bliss that Narad Muni has during that unrestricted movement. So we are told in this purport how Durvasa Muni traveled in a year. He traveled the whole of the material world and even parts of the spiritual world. But we know the reason why he did that. He was traveling in fear because he was being chased by its Darshan chakra. And this we know about the pastime of the great devotee Ambarish Maharaj, and how Durvasa Muni was very arrogant and showed anger, and anger which was baseless anger towards a pure devotee like Ambarish Muni, and wanted to kill Ambarish, King Ambarish, and how the Lord got very angry, and the Sudarshan chakra started chasing Durvasa Muni. So Durvasa Muni ran and ran and ran and traveled throughout the material world, and even a part of the spiritual world, going to different dharms, praying to each Lord, asking them to save him. And he even goes to Lord Narayan, and Lord Narayan says, I cannot save you. I cannot save you because you have offended my devotee, my true devotee. So we understand here the difference between a true devotee who who, like Narad Muni, who can travel unrestricted in bliss, and Durvasa Muni, who's a great yogi, a great mystic, and even a transcendentalist, but who is sometimes pulled down by certain material energies or certain material qualities, which denies him that unrestricted movement. So whereas now, so when he traveled, the Durvasa Munis traveled throughout the entirety of material space, and part of the spiritual space in 1 year only was full of fear, and there was no bliss in that. Okay. So the speed that Prabhupada mentions in the purport again about the speed with which the transcendentalist can move or travel is beyond the imagination of a materialist person. Okay, they can go to places, they can travel faster than the mind, but it is how you travel, the quality of that movement that matters. So this is what we have to remember. So if we are wanting, to become transcendentalists, we have to remember that we have to surrender to the Lord. Just denying sense gratification does not always guarantee that we will leave behind our false ego and intelligence and pride and arrogance as well. So if we do not surrender to the Lord, it is impossible to reach that pure, unrestricted land, limitless land of the spiritual world. So when this verse is talking about the transcendentalists, we've seen that, there are different ways to become a transcendentalist, but the ideal way to do so is to become a true devotee, a pure bhakta, and surrender to the Lord, and give up this body and go to the spiritual world. Of course, there are different ways. Of course, people can go up to the higher planets, but some of them can only go up to Svargaloka. Others who have, accrued more good karma or have understood a bit better, they can go up to the topmost material planets, but even then they are bound by material energy. And even if they are sometimes, like Durvasa Muni, able to reach parts of the spiritual world, if they do not leave their subtle materialistic inclinations, they will still be pulled down into the material world. They will still not have that unrestricted movement that is talked about in this verse. So in conclusion, we are being told that become a bhakta, become a true devotee. That is the only way. That is the best way of becoming a transcendentalist. Transcendentalist meaning someone who transcends this world. The best time transcendentalist, be a devotee. Okay, that is, you can be a jnani, you can be a yogi, but ask a jnani or a yogi to wake up every morning at 3:30 or 4 o'clock and do Mangalarti 365 days, throughout their entire lifetime. Ask a jnani or a yogi to clean pots every single day. And there might be hesitations at times, but ask that to a devotee who has understood why they were doing that they are doing that to serve the Lord. And in serving the Lord lies the true happiness in their souls. Those are the ones who are the best transcendentalists, and they are the one who can move, like Narad Muni, travel unrestricted in complete bliss. So we finish this discussion based on that. If there are any mistakes, please do forgive me. Thank you very much again for giving me this opportunity to discuss this.
Thank you so much, Mataji, for this wonderful session. It was a really eye-opening for this the simple process of bhakti to become the highest transcendentalist and to transmigrate into different planetary system. Thank you. I open this discussion for any questions, comments. Hare Krishna.
All corrections, if there are any corrections, please do correct me, because there are senior devotees. Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Mataji. It's so nice to see you. Hare Krishna, everyone. So nice to see you. So nice to hear you also, There is no scope for questions or comments or even criticism, because you have put everything so clear in so detail and repeatedly. So everything has got in our minds so clearly, for me especially, so nicely. So thank you for this very nice class discussion, and so many nice points you have put forward, and the differences between different yogis, right? So yesterday also we were talking about yogis, how some of them are still here. They are not gone. They come to see Bhishma Dev and Parikshit Maharaj. Why? These two are great devotees. They are Kshatriyas. They are going back home. Why? Because these two personalities, they had the Lord in their heart. They were praying to the Lord. Even though they were great kings, they were in political, they were doing the kingly duties, still they had the Lord. They are always praying to the Lord. The Lord is in their heart, and Parikshit Maharaj was saved in the womb. Bhishma Dev always had the Lord in his heart, whereas these yogis, as you said, none of the yogis will go and wake up early morning in Mangalarti or wash pots. They are like egoistic, because they sit in secluded places. They think of themselves. They don't think of, like, we will go on the road, we'll shout Harinam everywhere. Let it get into the ear. Let the holy name get into their ear, so that the seeds are already sown in the heart. Even if they don't do anything, they are hearing. Even if they, Prabhupada said, even if they don't take your book, put it in their hand. As long as they have touched it, next birth, you're sure that they will take to the devotional process. So we are teaching the devotional process, but comparing to the yogis, yes, we can see your outside layer. Inside, there is nothing, right? It's like I say, pride. I want to, yes, they understand that they want to leave this material world full of misery. They want to leave it. But what is the process? They have not understood the real process, which will help them faster. So thank you, Mataji. You put so everything in so nice detail. Thank you so much. It was nice hearing you. Hare Krishna.
For adding that, Mataji. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Prasanatma Prabhu, is it possible to close the session? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare-
Shabbat pranams to all the humble devotees. Sorry, my network is not at its best today. So just to pay my obeisances. Also, Shabbat pranams to Mataji. Thank you for the wonderful class. And request all the devotees to please unmute and chant the Hare Krishna mantra, glorification of her grace, Panchali Mataji. Please let's join. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna
Hare
Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare
Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Vancha kalpatarubhyascha
Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhaiva pratitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Ananda Koti Vaishnavind ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Panchali Kar Mataji ki jai. Thank you,
Jai.
Hari Bol. Thank you, everyone. Hare Krishna.
Mataji's
Nice
amazing.
class. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.